Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Last week, Jackie Aina posted a video dissecting all of some tips and tricks that both she has been using for years and she saw on TikTok, and kind of put them all into one big video, and I would like to try all of them together in the same video. That video she did was sponsored by NYX. This one is not, but I did pick up some of the products that she had talked about in that video because I want to test out Jackie Aina's routine because her skin is always looking flawless. So if you want to join me on that little adventure, trying out Jackie Aina's tips and tricks with some of her favorites, then make sure to keep on watching and don't forget to subscribe because I upload every other day. And that'll be the best way to stay up to date on all the fun stuff I'm posting. So if you want to jump into a whole base tutorial to get skin that is as flawless as Jackie Aina's, stay tuned. Okay, so I actually went line by line in that video and took notes on every single step that she does. So I'm going to start with her holy grail tip, which is setting your primer with powder. So I'm going to use the Marshmallow Primer from NYX, which she did use in that video. And I'm going to take one pump of that and just apply that to my entire face. Apparently I need more than one pump. Right off the bat, there's a little bit of tackiness to the skin. It's not sticky, but it's definitely a little bit tacky. I'm going to then follow that up with, and she actually used the butt of a sponge. This sponge is from the DSDM shop. That is the Dark Skin Makeup Daily store. So they have a bunch of sponges in a bunch of beautiful colors, and it is super soft. This is actually the first time I'm using it, so we're going to see how well it works. But I am going to take a little bit of the One Size powder from Patrick Starr, because she recommends a translucent powder. And I'm going to take that and just press that over my primer. So obviously right now there's no foundation on. I have a little concealer over here just because we have a breakout going on and I didn't really feel like having that on the entire video. But my skin does feel perfected, definitely looks matte. But you'll notice there's that little bit of shine to it, so it's still hydrated. So far I'm liking that. At this point, she takes her first blast of setting spray. She does, I think, like 3 throughout her entire video. And by layering the setting spray, it really lets it build into the formulas and make everything last. That's something I've been doing for years. I apply setting spray like 9 different times. And then I just like to pat everything out with the sponge, just to make sure that there's, nothing bunching up anywhere. All right, next we're going to go into underpainting, which is where you put on your concealer and your blush underneath your foundation. So I'm going to grab this Alamar complexion brush with the Rare Beauty Nearly Neutral Blush, and I'm going to add a whole lot of blush to my cheeks. The way that she applied it is she took it right on a brush, and she applied it wherever she normally adds, concentrating it on the upper apple of the cheek, which for my face shape, I like it to be a little bit closer to the cheekbone. And I am definitely taking a little more than I would normally do because this is going to be underneath my foundation. And then taking a little bit more on the bridge of the nose because apparently it's really cute to have that blushy sunburn moment on your nose. Next, we're going to follow that up with concealer and color corrector. Now, she did a demo where she did the color corrector on one side, followed by the concealer, and the concealer on the other side. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do the color corrector and concealer. I'm not going to do like a 1-in-1. But you need such a small amount. She used more of a red peachy color corrector because she's got some blue purpley under eye discoloration or dark circles, whatever you want to call it. Mine is a little bit, you see that little ring of yellow under there? So I'm using a lavender color corrector just because that is a color that will neutralize the issue that I have more. But the principle is exactly the same. If you have discoloration on your under eyes and you want to cancel it out, use a color corrector that's opposite on the color wheel. And look how much brighter this area looks versus the other one. So this is actually going to allow me to use much less concealer, because I've already neutralized the color that I would be trying to cover, so I get to only use my concealer to brighten, so we will use so much less of it. So now that we've color corrected, I'm going to jump into the Born This Way Multi-Use Sculpting Concealer, just because I know Jackie Aina loves that one. And I'm going to take it right here on the innermost part of the inner corner and a little bit on the outer corner of the eye just to help to shape the eye. Gone are the days where we do this whole triangle. It is not cute to have that much product. I like to let my skin breathe a little bit. And with no additional product, I'm just going to like move that around a little bit just to make sure that everything is looking good. I will also take this in all of the areas that I find I need to cover up. She does not put foundation on her nose, but I have a lot of redness and discoloration. I already did the upper lip because obviously we're covering something up today. And then once that's in place, she leaves it to set down a little bit and then blends it out a little bit later. By leaving it in place and letting it kind of oxidize and air out on the skin, it does actually increase the coverage. So I'm going to blend it out on the nose, chin, and forehead because those are the areas where I don't want a lot of coverage. I really just want a little bit of brightening. But I will leave the under eye and the lip a little bit longer just so that it gives me more coverage and more brightness in that location. So far, this sponge is so soft. It almost feels like foam, it's so soft, but it's not ripping or tearing. So it's definitely nice and strong. And then now that this has sat for a little while, I'm going to get into the crevice of the eye and then blend up. And see how this already lifts the eye and gives you this elongated shape? Obviously, when we take the foundation around it, it'll look less stark. But because there's nothing here but blush, this looks a lot brighter than it actually is. Once we add the foundation in this area and kind of blend it all together, it'll look a lot more well blended and a lot less stark in comparison. This is the point where we go in with one more spray of setting spray. And then with the sponge, just pressing that into the skin. I want to make sure that everything that I have already put down gets a nice little spray of setting spray pressed into it. This is something that I've done as well for years, so Jackie Aina does it and I'm also doing it. I know that it's a good tip. And now the last thing you do here before you actually get to your foundation is spot concealing. So you will notice that that little blemish that I hid earlier needs a tiny bit more coverage on there. So I'm just going to add a touch of concealer there. And just like I did on the under eyes, I'm going to give that a little bit of time just to chill, and then I'll blend it out, and then we will be going into our foundation. All right, so for the foundation, we are going to layer that on with a brush. I'm going to use the DSDM Shop hand palette just because I am using the NYX Total Control droppers, and I like to take that, or any dropper. I haven't used this foundation before, but like the Catrice Dropper drops, and I've used the Cover FX drops. I don't like dropping them directly onto my brush. I like to put it on some form of acrylic palette and then work off of there. I am in the shade 7.5 Soft Beige, and I did test the match on myself, and it is the perfect match. So I'm just going to give myself, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 drops here. Not too much, but I'm definitely not going to need all of this foundation because this stuff definitely has some coverage. So I'm actually going to grab that same brush we used earlier, and I'm going to pick up, this is about one of the little dots. I took a tiny bit kind of off to the side and then patted it around. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to apply that on the lower half of the face and up and over the blush, blending really softly just so that this all becomes one and well blended. Picking up a tiny bit more as needed and doing a combination of this like patting, stippling motion and then blending everything in. And look how this side looks compared to this side already. The blush is less intense. The pigment as a whole is very well spread out. The color looks good. And it definitely is evening everything out. And because I'm taking such a small amount, like you see how much is still on the palette, It says that you can use 4 or 5 drops total on the face for full coverage. So I've basically used about 2 drops so far, and it is pretty sheer. Now, this is where Jackie Aina and I do differ. She says, don't even waste your time putting any foundation on the nose. But like I said, I have some discoloration in my nose and a broken blood vessel that gives me this really pronounced red line right down the middle of my forehead. So because of that, I don't have the ability to skip my nose. So it's really up to what you feel you need. But for me, that is not optional. Now at this point, I'm going to go back in with the sponge. And I'm actually going to take a little bit more product off of the back, not much. And I'm just going to press that over everything just to even it out a little bit more. What I like about a sponge, especially at this point in my foundation routine, is it is going to pick up product from anywhere where there might be a little bit of an extra amount sitting on top of the skin. And alternatively, it will put some down if you missed a spot. So it's just going to give everything a little bit more of a seamless finish. Next up is the liquid highlight. So I'm actually going to grab the Cover FX Glitter Drops. This is in the shade Nova, because this is such a beautiful highlight. And I'm not even going to squeeze the dropper. I'm just going to add a few little dots on the highest point of the cheeks. And then using the same brush I used for my foundation and a mirror that is much closer to my face, I'm going to use the top of that brush and pull that over the cheekbone, and then flipping it to the other side, blending it out. Now remember, this might be a little intense, but we haven't even powdered yet, so that will soften this whole thing a little bit more. So using that same translucent powder and making sure I have no creases, I'm going to take the tip of my sponge and I'm going to concentrate that really, really close to the under eye area. Not baking, because we don't really bake anymore. And by we, I mean me, and that's because I live in Florida and it's humid and I don't need to do that as much as I did in New York. And I'm just going to leave that on the under eye for however amount of time you feel is right. It really does depend on personal preference. I don't like to leave it for any longer than like 2 minutes, just because it will get a little brighter under there than I want to. And when I am ready to kick it off, I will grab a fluffy powder brush. And this is actually, again, another Jackie Aina secret. Taking a pressed powder in a combination of a pat and sweep motion, just kicking that powder off of the under eye. This is actually also a Patrick Star tip. Using a powder to remove another powder really does just seamlessly block that first powder away. And then with whatever's left, I'm going to just set down the rest of the face. With my skin type, not setting down is not an option. And I don't know if you guys can see, but the cheekbones are definitely still catching that sparkly, highlighty, shimmery glitter. So it's definitely giving everything for that. Now, before anything else, we go in with one last spray of setting spray. But minus that one thing that I'm still having some issues peeking through because I didn't color correct that, I think my skin looks really perfected and really quite beautiful. So at this point, you can do your brows, you can do your eyes, and then you can add powder. So I'm going to add some powder bronzer and a little bit of powder blush, and I will be back for the final reveal on how this base works with everything else. All right, I am back. The face is done. I threw on a really quick eye look, and this lash keeps making my eyes tear, so it's only like half glued on. So ignore the pseudo wonky lash. Anyway, going through all of the tips, I think the only one I didn't love was the underpainting, which is something I've notoriously never been a huge fan of. I always feel like when I'm done blending over my foundation, no matter how sheer I go, I always end up having to grab more blush and throw it on top. But other than that, I do feel like my skin looks really perfected. I had to put a little more rosiness in the cheeks, but other than that, like, my pores are not super, like, defined at all. Texture on my cheek, even with glitter on top, is not super vibrant or over the top. It's a nice, subtle, ethereal glow. My skin just looks healthy. And all in all, I think it came together really beautifully. So, I mean, it is no secret Jackie Aina knows what she's talking about when it comes to both makeup and tips for how to get your skin to look flawless, but I've never really been into the powder over primer thing, but I might be converted. That might have been enough to get everything in gear because this just looks so good. My skin has not looked this good, especially like close up, in quite some time. So let me know your thoughts down below. Which of the tips that she gave you that I went over today do you think worked the best? Was it the powder over the foundation? Was it, you know, layering your setting sprays, which you guys know I am a huge fan of? I think the sponge also definitely helped because it's a much softer sponge than I'm used to using, especially in recent times. I tend to use sponges that are a little more dense, and this one is so soft that I feel like it really helped airbrush everything on really beautifully, so nothing looks super heavy. So let me know your thoughts, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.